Hello. For my entrepreneurship project, I am interviewing my dad.
Hi, my name is Charles Betancourt. Also, I am the owner and president of a small property management company in Berkeley, California, North Berkeley Properties. We do almost exclusively student housing right around UC Berkeley, which means we operate and um, manage multifamily residential properties uh, close to campus in Berkeley.
Alrighty. So I'm just gonna ask you some questions about your business. And to start off, why did you start, or like, yeah, why did you start your business?
We started this business because there was an opportunity. This would have been in the late 80s, I'm sorry, in the late 90s, early 2000s. There was a change in the way that the city of Berkeley uh, ran their rent control program. And prior to 1999, there was a very, very strict um, rent control ordinance in the city of Berkeley, which only allowed owners to raise the rent on a vacant unit a certain percentage of the prior rent. So rents were artificially held down for a very long period of time. And what that led to was a ton of deferred maintenance in buildings, a lot of decreased value. And when this law changed, it's called the Costa-Hawkins law, and what it allowed you to do was raise your rent to market when someone moved out. And so that provided a bunch of opportunities for us to look at buildings that had um, tenant profiles that were, longer term tenants that may be turning over, and turn those units into units that would be attractive to students. So Berkeley had a lot of units that had a lot of apartments that had a lot of um, single people living in 2 and 3 bedroom apartments with big living rooms, big dining rooms, with only one person living there, and it was not a very efficient way of providing housing. When that law changed, it allowed us to uh, increase the rental amounts, but also change the tenant profiles from single people in their late 60s, 70s, who were just kind of hanging out in apartments because they were so cheap, to offer these to students where you would put 3 or 4 or 5 students into a single unit, and the housing was much more efficient. So essentially, we got into it because there was a big change in a law.
And how old were you when you got into it?
Uh, that's a good question. I was 27, 28. I had been working in restaurants for a long, long time, and had an opportunity to work for a property manager for free, essentially, for a year while I got my real estate license. And that enabled me to leave the restaurant industry and get into this full time.
And how old is your business, do you think?
I started my company in 2002. We just turned 20 years old couple years ago. I had been working in Berkeley since 1998. I worked there for, I'm sorry, 1996. I worked there for about 6 years for someone else who uh, was looking to get out of the property management industry and into developing software. And I purchased his portfolio of properties from him when I got my real estate broker's license. And we've been putting together small partnerships to purchase buildings ever since. So that's essentially what we do, Charlie. We put together small partnerships, typically a limited liability company or a limited partnership, to purchase multifamily residential units, and then my company manages them.
Very cool. Okay, so my next question is, what form of business did you choose for the company and why? It's like its legal status.
It's a corporation. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
What form of business does the company choose and why?
It's an S corp. And why? I think liability has a lot to do with it. There's many ways that you can own a business, sole proprietorship or different types of partnerships. For what we do, I'm really the only one who is an officer within our corporation. So an S corp is kind of the simplest way to do that. You still limit your liability to exposure. It costs a little bit of money to maintain and run each year, but you're not personally attached to the business. So if something were to happen with our business, my liability would be limited to my company and not me personally. It has certain tax benefits also, but mainly it's a way to kind of distance yourself from personal liability.
And when you were starting your business, when you were 27, around that age, and you left the restaurant industry, did you know that you wanted to start your own business? Did you have a plan to do that, or was it kind of
Nope,
fall into
did
place?
not have a plan. Uh, the only plan that I had was I thought that it might be a good way to learn enough to do this for myself at some point. I did not have a plan to do it for other people. So my only forethought was my family has a little bit of real estate. If I could learn enough to help manage that part of our family's assets, that'd be great. And as it turned out, there was a big need for people who knew how to navigate rent control in Berkeley. It's a really, really specific market. It's got some extraordinary ordinances and hoops to jump through to do business there. And that opportunity just kind of presented itself as we went. It was not the intention.
Okay. I know you talked about this earlier, but if you want to just touch on it again, your key customers and why you chose that group of people.
Well, customers would be the students. Our customers are the roughly 40,000 students at UC Berkeley every year. Those would be our customers. Our clients, it's a very small company. We have about 20 buildings in Berkeley, a little under 400 units. So it's a pretty small company, very closely held, family, friends. And if I could choose to do it somewhere else with less regulation and less bureaucracies to deal with, I would, but there would be less opportunity. The fact that it's a tough place to work presents its own opportunities.
Do you think that's because there aren't as many people looking to enter that market, or?
Exactly. Yeah, there's not as many people who want to deal with that. There are so many other opportunities with less regulation, but I think less reward also in the end. That it's a lot easier to be an absentee owner of rental property somewhere else than it is in Berkeley. If you're not there every day, it can be a problem.
Yeah. And as far as marketing your units to the students, do you have any particular strategies that you use, or do you?
Our software has gotten so advanced, obviously, since when I started. When I started, there were main two main sources for marketing rental properties. It was a company called Berkeley Connection and a company called House Finders. And kids would subscribe to this newsletter. Basically, they'd pay a fee to get a small leaflet that listed apartments for rent. And there were no pictures. It was just addresses and a small description of the property, and what the rent was, and a phone number to contact the owner. Um, I would typically, over the phone, I would call these people, give them a description of the property, place an ad, like a lot like a classified ad in a newspaper, and then wait for people to call us to look at an apartment. Now, through our software, our management software, every apartment that we have that's available, we have a 3D tour of. It's called Matterport, and it is a three-dimensional walk through each individual unit that's current. It's up to date. It's like it happened yesterday, and that software puts that ad out to all of the major online rental form, Redfin, apartments.com. There's, literally hundreds of them. And you make this one ad and it goes out to everybody all at once. And so your exposure is huge. You literally, anybody, if you type in just apartment front in Berkeley, hundreds of ads pop up, and they're all basically populated the same way, really, really quickly, super efficient. And you can see everything that's out there in minutes.
And do you think that like your buildings or something about like where they are? What's like the unique value or attraction to your buildings?
It's everything with real estate is where the location is. If you're close to campus and you have a reasonably well maintained building, you're much more attractive than something that's could be brand new that's 5 blocks away. The location is always primary. Condition of the building would be secondary. And the thing that older buildings have as an advantage over the new stuff is square footage. Everything that's built that's new is really, really maximized for efficiency.
Mhm.
You'll have a 400 square foot studio that current market might be $3,000 a month for two people. And a similarly located studio that I have that was built in the mid 60s to early 70s is 800 square feet, and it's half the price. So it's, location is the biggest key with any real estate deal, and especially with apartments. When kids come in, especially from out of town, they're looking for apartments. They'll literally get out a map and draw a line. I'm not going to live past this certain street, even though it may be less than half a block away. They just don't look past certain parameters, and location, like everything in real estate, is the key.
Okay. Moving on to a little bit of a different side of your business. This question asks, do you have a balance sheet or an income statement? Not
Uh,
or, but like
both,
both.
both. My business itself operates more off of a balance sheet per se. But each individual building can be looked at as an individual business, and they run off of an income and expense statement. And so anytime you're having to send financials to a lender or to an insurer, you're working off an income and expense statement. About my business proper operates more off of a balance sheet. Expenses are pretty minimal, not very variable, and so a balance sheet makes more sense than an income and expense statement. For an apartment, you have, 3 times the amount of expenses categories wise that can change a lot from year to year. And so an income and expense statement is a lot more of a clear, a couple of years of an income and expense statement gives you a better picture of how the building is operating.
And do you have projected financial earnings? Like how far in the future are you able to look?
For us, That's tough. For us in those buildings, it's really year to year, and it changes literally year to year. And I won't know really, I won't have a great idea of what our income will be. It's based on two things. It's based on the amount of rental increase for each unit when someone moves out.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's 3% a year. We've had years that it's 10%. And then how many of those units actually move out. So you could have a building that is 22 units. One year you have half of the building turnover, and you're getting a 5% increase. The next year you may have two units move out. So it for us it's definitely a year to year thing, and it's based on how many people. It's based on turnover, how many people move out.
And have you ever had any issues with cash flow before
Sure.
in your business?
Not a lot. We're pretty unique in that, like I said, there's 40,000 students at Cal all looking for an apartment. It's kind of a captive audience. But two times, once in the financial crisis around 2008, 2009, typically our leases run for 1 year. Most leases end at the end of May, and they begin the first or second week of June, and they run for a year. That at that time, when the economy was in a decline, a lot of students went home for the summer, and they did not rent apartments for the summer. They just came back in August and looked for apartments. And then, of course, COVID. We had a lot of, obviously the school was closed. People weren't renting apartments. The good thing that happened, or was fortunate for us, was that we were not in a market where a lot of people stayed in their apartments and did not pay rent. A lot of the markets right around us, Albany, Berkeley, not Berkeley, Albany, Oakland, even San Francisco, had tenants that stayed in their apartments and did not pay rent. And that's extremely problematic. You still have expenses associated with those units, where we were able to take advantage of the vacancy to make improvements to the units so that when the students did come back to school, we had marketable units.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, that didn't happen everywhere, and a lot of people are still trying to get people out that have stopped paying rent and are blaming it on COVID or other circumstances, and it's really tough to get an eviction in California.
And why are no, was that a city thing in Berkeley? Like because in those other
I
areas
think
you
no,
mentioned.
I think it's circumstantial just with having students. Most like if you look at Oakland and San Francisco compared to Berkeley, um, most of those are working professional people who are renting apartments. And when they weren't going into the office, they weren't working, they just stopped paying rent. Whereas students, they didn't pay rent, but they went home. They didn't occupy the unit.
Mhm.
I don't think it was necessarily a city thing. I think it had more to do with the circumstances of the tenant base.
Mhm. When you go to price your units, how does that what factors are there?
What do we look at to price our units?
Yeah.
Um, Prior rent history, what happened last year, um, and what is happening in the general economy now, and how quickly typically, if we throw a unit up for rent, um, it doesn't take much more than a week or two to rent the apartment. If it takes longer than that, we know it's priced too high.
Mhm.
Essentially, the main idea in Berkeley is if you have an apartment that's well located, if you are asking the right amount, you'll rent it. You should not have a vacancy that goes on and on and on and on. That just means you're asking the wrong price for it. So if we put an apartment up for rent and we have an open house and no one shows up, we know that we've got it priced wrong, and we can change that for the next week. But uh, very seldom does it happen that you list an apartment for rent and um, people show up and they're not interested. If they're showing up, then you have it priced right.
And
Um, and
you
we use the same thing. We use the same property management software. Um, Shows us what all of the other units, comparable units in our area are renting for.
As far as your competitors, what you mentioned, you had that software that shows you what the other units are running for. Uh, do you find it that you're often competing with them, like undercutting prices or
Um, we try to stay, we try not to push the top of the market. We try to stay competitive. So if I would much rather rent an apartment for $100 less than somebody else if it is not vacant for a month. So I'd rather get it rented for a lower price more quickly. Um, so we don't really push the top of the market. The top of the market generally right now is set by new construction. As I said before, you know, they may have a studio that's $3,000 a month where we can afford, or we do charge 18, 17, $1,800 a month for a much larger unit just because it's older.
Mhm.
And so we have meetings every Monday during rental season, and we discuss what things are renting and what are not, what's priced right, what is not. It's something you got to keep an eye on every week, and it changes from week to week. It's not a set it and forget it kind of thing. You got to kind of stay on top of it all the time.
Okay. And next, I wanted to ask you about advertising. If there were any specific pieces of advertising that you were either proud of or fond of or think helped you out.
Uh,
You
Two
could-
things helped us out quite a bit, or I don't know if they've helped us, but they've been a big change in what we do. One is, like I said, this product called Matterport, which allows you to take a 3D uh, tour of an apartment, and almost every aspect of real estate uses it now. It's a camera you set up and you move throughout the apartment, and it pastes together these videos and images of the apartment so you can get a really good idea of, you know, basically pulling up to the apartment, walking through the front door, through the hallway, up the stairs, into the unit, all the way through all aspects of the unit. And then it gives you a floor plan, you know, from above, um, and a view out, you know, you can see out of every window. It's like you're there. And that's really changed things. I mean, you seldom have to have an open house where you have 30 or 40 people showing up because everybody's seen it online. If they know where it is and they've seen the floor plan and you can see a current 3D tour of it, it's really changed things. The other thing is these drone advertisements.
Mhm.
You know, they can get a 3D tour of the entire outside of the building and the neighborhood in a matter of minutes, and it's really changed. You know, people would normally call and say, "Okay, my son's going to be going to school there. How far away is the bus stop?" Well, in this drone image, you can see exactly where the bus stop is, and where the store is down the street, and how far it is from campus. It gives you a very good idea of where you're at in the neighborhood. And those two things are not new, but I'd say in the last we're using it a lot more in the last 5 years than we ever did.
Yeah. And you have your own website, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And would you say that has helped?
You couldn't do it without it. I don't know that I've never not had one, so I don't know if it's helped, but it's you couldn't be competitive without one.
And if I were to
Everybody
go
has
to
a
your,
website.
if I were to go to your website right now, what would I see?
You would see probably listings for 20 or 30 apartments for rent. You would see pages dedicated to like helpful information, who to call when, um, general facts about the neighborhoods. But mostly it's a marketing tool. So yeah, you'd see a lot of apartments, especially this time of year, you'd see a lot of apartments for rent.
Sweet. Okay. Oh, second. So when you started your business, how was it financed?
With a loan, but borrowed money. I had to purchase the uh portfolio of managed properties from the guy that I worked for, and I had to pay one half of the year's earnings to him for a year. So I had to borrow money, and once I paid the person I bought the business from, then I started paying back the person I borrowed the money from. I did not borrow it from an entity. I borrowed it from a family member.
Okay. And when you do your business, where do you do business? Like how is it conducted?
I go into the office every day. So I'm in Berkeley every day. Both I have three people that work for us full time, an office manager, a leasing agent, and someone who does all of our maintenance and repair stuff. And we're there every day. It's the kind of business where you really have to be able to go look at things. Pictures and videos and Zoom calls and all that work great, but they're not the same as actually being there. And we need to be able to hand out keys to prospective tenants. Um, it's a business where you really need to be. I think that's what kind of separates um, us from other management companies. You might have and there are management companies in Berkeley. There's companies managing buildings in Berkeley that are located in Seattle or Texas or San Francisco, and it's not the same as actually being there when, for instance, like the fire department has to do an inspection and for some reason their key doesn't work. Well, if the key doesn't work, then I'll drive right over and open the door for you. A lot of times a lot of companies aren't operating that way.
Mhm. Last couple of questions. Have you ever run into a problem with the law, such as being sued by somebody? And what happened with that scenario?
Um, I've knock wood. I haven't been sued. I've sued a couple people for one for misrepresenting the condition of a building that we purchased. Um, it had some active City of Berkeley housing code enforcement inspections that were ongoing when we were in contract to buy the building, and they didn't tell us about it. And those inspections resulted in a bunch of work that needed to be done to the units that they should have told us about when we were looking at purchasing the building.
Mhm.
Um, Another time we had a hotel build a property right next to one of our buildings, and in doing so, they eliminated the fire egress out the back of our building, and so that was a 3-year litigation um, trying to decide who was going to pay for that, whose fault it was, who was going to pay for it, and how it's going to be remedied. And I can tell you that anytime you're involved in a lawsuit, there's no winners. It's probably the worst possible scenario. And the only people who really come out ahead are the lawyers.
Yeah. And just my last question. What principles do you kind of abide by at work, or what it what are your morals and values that you try to use in business?
uh, just the same as you do in your life. You treat everybody fairly, um, and you try to be open and upfront with everyone that you're dealing with. Uh, um, Being clear and underestimating your performance and uh, outperforming is a good thing. Don't try to oversell yourself. Um, you always look a lot better if you do better than you say you're going to do. Um, it's kind of just to you operate your business the same way you do your life. Just be fair to everybody.
Mhm. Well, those sound like some good rules to live by. That's really that's all the questions I have. I appreciate it, Dad.
Okay, no problem.
All right. Thank you very much.
I'll talk to you later.